Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael, and we're going to be getting right back into some more Reddit stories. If you enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Now, without further ado, let's begin. This first story was created in the infidelity subreddit by a user named 𝕔𝕜𝕕. The post was made in 2021 and is titled, "It's been 4 years and I thought I was past it. But after this Memorial Day, I'm not and I need advice. I've been stalking these subreddits for a while, and I thought just reading people's stories would help me. Or if I found someone with a similar situation, I could see how they handled it. But I guess my situation is unique. So here we go. First, let me be clear. I don't care if you think this is fake. I don't care if you want to rip me a new one after I vent. It already happened. I thought I was okay. I thought I had moved on, but after last weekend, it all came back, and that anger I had back then just came back in full force. Even though I'm back home with my fiance, that anger toward my ex just won't go away. I spent years in anger management for what she did and the situation that was created, and I thought I was okay. Right now, I just turned 39. I was 18 when I met my ex, 𝕔𝕜𝕕. During that time, I was a gangbanger with the Latin Kings. I had been a member since I was 13 and was always in and out of trouble. 𝕔𝕜𝕕 was a church girl. My grandmother dragged me to Sunday Mass, and when I saw her, to me, it was love at first sight. I asked my cousin, who was a friend of hers, if he could introduce us, but he refused. He didn't want me to mess with her. He didn't want me to ruin her. Have you ever met someone that you wanted to make yourself better to be with? Someone you wanted to be that man who would walk the right path? That was her. When I found out that she was going to church almost every day, I hung out by the steps talking to her. I always walked her to and from church. She made me feel like I wasn't worthless. One thing led to another, and we were dating, and I felt great. For a year and a half, I pushed myself away from the gang life, got my GED, became a regular churchgoer, and was thinking about the future when I got unintentionally pulled back in. I was at a store and ran into someone that I used to have problems with. They were running their mouths, and I tried to ignore it. I swear I did. I just let them talk and walked away, but then I got stabbed in the shoulder blade and I lost my mind. I beat the shit out of him. I got arrested, and suddenly, it was like the progress I had made to better my life had vanished. 𝕔𝕜𝕕 was pissed at me. My grandmother kept bringing up my past mistakes, and my cousin was telling me that he knew I wasn't going to change. My public defender saw me trying to better myself and, by the grace of God, got me off after a month in lockup. Despite being angry with me, 𝕔𝕜𝕕 did visit me almost daily. A month after I got out, I found out I was going to be a father, and I didn't want my kid to have a dad who was dead or in jail. We eloped, I went to a trade school to become a mechanic, and I busted my ass for my future family. When Luna was born, it was almost the worst day of my life. 𝕔𝕜𝕕 wouldn't stop bleeding. She went into shock, and they had to give her a double hysterectomy. She was in the hospital for months, and Luna became my world. I wanted her life to be the best. I wanted to give her the world. When 𝕔𝕜𝕕 was released, I promised her that our daughter would have a life far better than ours, and for years I kept that promise. I saved enough money to move us to the suburbs, became homeowners, and was a Girl Scout leader, if you could believe that. I made sure Luna went to private school, taught her how to defend herself, and always made sure I was the perfect husband. I didn't know my parents and didn't have a positive male role model in my life, so I didn't know what a healthy relationship looked like. That's a lie. TV dads were my male role models, and I mimicked them and the marriages they had on TV. As the years went by, I owned my own garage, my cousin became a pastor, my grandmother was still a pain in my ass, and my relationship with my wife was stronger than ever. I made sure I kept my prison body, but Luna hated me. Since she turned 13, she just started hating me. She didn't want me to hug her, rolled her eyes every time I told her I loved her, and ignored me when I asked her about her day in school. It hurt me, and 𝕔𝕜𝕕 saw it. She told me that she was a teenager and that I should just let it ride. She will come back to me. For 2 years, it was like that. So for her 𝕔𝕜𝕕𝕕, I wanted to go all out. I got everything she wanted, and she was still disrespectful. Briefly, the old me almost came out just to put her in her place, but instead I went to my cousin, vented my frustration and doubts about being a good father, and he told me to just let her be and said a prayer for me. I wanted a slideshow for the father-daughter dance. I had a chunk of the pictures of us together, but I realized I didn't have any recent pictures of us. She didn't want to take any. The last time I had pictures of her and me smiling together was on her 13th birthday, and those were on my daughter's broken tablet. I took that tablet and went to a repair shop, and I didn't care about the cost. I needed that tablet fixed. After a day and $300, the tech fixed it and I was happy. I knew her passcode, but I never bothered invading her privacy. I just wanted those pictures, and when I opened that tablet and looked in the gallery, there they were, my little girl, smiling and happy to be with me. I felt great. Then the instant messages appeared. It was my daughter talking to my wife. It was a long banter about how she didn't want me to dance with her, and it did hurt, but like my wife said, she's being a teenager. Then she said something that destroyed me. She texted me why she had to do the father-daughter dance with me since I'm not her father. I felt my heart stop, I got dizzy, my mouth dried up, and I needed to sit down. My wife responded that I raised her, I loved her, and that made me her father. But Luna responded by saying that my cousin is her father and that she can't wait to turn 18 so she could tell me the truth and live with her real dad. She said she hated me and thanked God that I'm not her father. Marisol began cussing her out, saying that it was a mistake for my cousin to tell her the truth 2 years ago, and the more they talked, the angrier I became. My wife lied to me for 15 years. My cousin, whom I confided in about my issues with Luna and my fears about being a bad father, not only slept with my wife, but had me raise his child. I wanted to hurt them. I felt a mixture of anger, sorrow, and grief. I wanted to scream, cry, and die at the same time, if that makes any sense. I went to a dark place, and so I wouldn't do anything stupid. I told Marisol that I needed to focus on work so I could pay for the 𝕔𝕜𝕖𝕕, and instead I drove to Manhattan and saw my old public defender, who wasn't a low-level attorney anymore. He had a nice, expensive firm near Midtown East. I was surprised that he remembered me, but apparently I was his first case as a public defender. We sat down and I told him everything. I gave him the tablet, and when he turned it on, the messages just kept coming. Only this time, Luna was talking to my cousin, her real father, and he was telling her to give me a chance. He said I was always there for her, but Luna told him that so was he. It made sense that they had so much in common, and she even called him Papi multiple times in their conversation, to which he responded by telling her that she was his little girl. We went through our options, and he asked me what I wanted to do. I told him that I wanted to go full scorched earth. I wanted to poison the well. He asked me several times if that was really what I wanted, and I nodded. I also told him that everything had to be filed before the 𝕔𝕜𝕐𝕕 in 2 weeks. So we sat down and spent the next 12 hours on what needed to be done, and I followed his instructions to the letter. I secretly placed my business for sale, called the private school, and told them that I would not be paying for next year, closed the college accounts and the savings that I had for Luna, and prepared to place my house for sale online. No one was the wiser. I followed his instructions perfectly. There was only one thing I deviated from: the day of the 𝕔𝕜𝕐𝕕. That day went off without a hitch. The whole family was there. Luna was smiling and having fun. Marisol kept asking me if I was okay, and I lied to her. It was hard lying to her. From the moment I met her, I never lied to her. During those 2 weeks, every time I kissed her, held her, or made love to her, it was hard not to scream at her. It was hard not to hate her. She knowingly let me raise another man's child. She slept with my cousin, a man I saw as my brother, the godfather of my child, the best man when I eloped, my confidant. So the rage was hard to suppress, to say the least. When it was time for the father-daughter dance, I called her to the center of the stage. She looked annoyed but walked over. I had the music playing and she smiled, and it tore me apart seeing her smile at me. For years I wanted to see that smile again, and now I didn't want it. As we danced, I had the slideshow playing, pictures of the two of us, and towards the end of the song, screenshots of her text messages with her mother and real father. Needless to say, this didn't bode too well. Marisol looked like she saw a ghost. Luna just kept staring at the large screen, and my cousin just stared at me with fear. Marisol ran to me and told me that she could explain, and I told her that I filed for a divorce and that she could explain it in court. She grabbed my arm, begging me, and I pulled back. I told Luna that I busted my ass to give her the world, and now she doesn't deserve it. I began to walk out, but not before telling my cousin that every time I see him, I'm going to knock him out. Then I knocked him out. The aftermath was harsh. Marisol and Luna were at my grandmother's apartment. Her family was shocked and disgusted with her. They wanted nothing to do with her. Her father actually apologized to me. I don't know why. He never liked me despite my turning my life around. That man hated me, but now I was the perfect husband and father. Just a few days prior, I was the former piece of shit. My grandmother had the audacity to tell me about the story of Abraham and how when he came back from battle 3 years later, his wife had a 1-year-old child and he raised him as his own. She said I should be like Abraham, so I told her to get the out of my house. Marisol came a few days later crying as soon as she saw me, telling me that it was an accident, that when I was arrested she was so angry at me and my cousin was there to console her, and one thing led to another and they had sex. It happened only one time and she was faithful to me ever since. She was willing to take a lie detector test to prove it. So I asked her how long she knew Luna wasn't mine, and she started crying more. That look she gave me just told me that she knew from day one, and I asked her to leave. She wanted to go to counseling, telling me that I was overreacting and we could make it work. It was in the past and I needed to get over it, that I am Luna's father despite what happened. I allowed my temper to get the best of me. I must have repeated "get over it" over a dozen times at full volume while grabbing her shit and tossing it out the door. I called her a lying whore. I told her that I didn't want to see her face ever again, and I told her that this life that I built no longer belongs to her before shoving her out the door. A couple of weeks went by and she kept blowing up my phone. Not once did Luna try to reach out to me. Marisol was shocked to learn that I sold my business, even more so when she found out that I had an open house. She came in screaming, telling the viewers to get out of her house and pleading with me to seek help, claiming that I was ruining our marriage and that I had no right to sell our home, the home where we raised our child. I told her that this house was full of lies. It's a house where I raised another man's child, and when I sell it, I will give her half and order her to get out before I call the cops. It was a bluff. All she had to do was play the victim and I would have been arrested, but she didn't. She complied. Shortly after this, my cousin came to talk to me and I knocked him out, dragged him outside, and closed the door. I refused mediation. Marisol wanted to reconcile, but I didn't. I wanted a divorce and my attorney filed for a fast-track divorce. In 3 months, we were in the Nassau County Courthouse. I barely spoke to anyone during that time. I read horror stories about the court system, especially during divorce proceedings, but I didn't have that. I had a female judge who was very fair. My attorney took care of everything. First, Marisol's lawyer tried to bring up my past when I was in a gang as if my past was a reason for me to be a terrible husband and father, but my attorney quickly shut that down and the judge reprimanded her attorney for trying to shame someone who had turned their life around. My attorney presented all the evidence and offered a lump sum alimony payment with the pending sales of the house and business. At first, Marisol kept asking me to reconsider, but I ignored her, and when she finally realized that I wasn't budging, she agreed. Yet the real surprise happened when it came to child support. My attorney presented all of the text messages from Luna's conversations with Marisol, showing that not only did Luna know I was not her father, but she also could not wait to be with her real father, saying that she no longer had to live a lie. Marisol was completely caught off guard by this. Then my attorney filed a motion to have my name removed from Luna's birth certificate, to have my last name removed, as well as to not be responsible for any child support since all parties agreed that my cousin was her father. Marisol was shocked by this. She yelled at me, begging me not to do this to Luna, that I am her father because I raised her. As pathetic as I may sound right now, if Luna hadn't acted that way towards me, if she hadn't said those things, I would have agreed. There were moments when I wanted to reach out and try to make it work, but then I would look at Luna's continuing text messages to her friends, her real father and mother, and I would refocus on my resolve. To this day, I don't know what hurts the most. Being lied to by a woman who you thought was the love of your life, or having a child whom you tried to make a better life for, to give them the world, only to have them toss you aside like trash. The judge was quiet for a long while, reading page after page of the text messages. In the end, she agreed. I was not financially responsible for Luna and my name could be removed. My attorney also filed a motion for the courts to go after my cousin for child support and a motion to sue my cousin in civil court for all the money I had spent raising Luna, the private schools, dance classes, Girl Scouts, horseback lessons, everything I had ever spent on that child. After my attorney explained to the judge that my cousin committed fraud by knowingly allowing me to raise his daughter without offering any financial support or assistance, it was a Hail Mary and the damn judge agreed. I didn't bother looking at Marisol when the judge made her decision. I didn't bother listening to her as I walked out of the courthouse. I didn't care as I heard her cry, her telling me that she only cheated one time and had been faithful ever since. I didn't care anymore. A few weeks later, my ex called me, shocked that I had stopped payments on Luna's private school and all of her activities, and told me to call her baby daddy before hanging up. Even Luna called me, the first time since this entire ordeal, and she called me crying that she had to go to public school, that they were moving back to the old neighborhood, and how scary it was, and how she wanted us to be a family again. I told her to go to her real father, the man who she truly wanted, and ask him. I yelled at her, told her that not only did she know for years, but I had read all the text messages, the back and forth, and from her own words, she was thankful that a hoodlum like me wasn't her father, even though I hadn't been a hoodlum since the day I found out I was going to be a father. I hung up on her after that. I thought about ending it countless times. I thought about ending my cousin, but I made him pay. He had to pay me $500,000. $500,000 that was all mine, and not 1 cent belonged to my ex because she agreed to the lump sum. I didn't care that the money came from the church. I was hurting. I left New York shortly after and went to Idaho, as far away from New York as possible. I just picked a random state and city and left. I opened up a new shop and got a house, but for 2 years I had trust issues. For 2 years I saw a therapist, went to anger management, and I went to rage rooms. It wasn't easy, until I found myself going back to church, and ironically that was where I met my fiance. Jocelyn is wonderful. She had just turned 30 at the time and we hit it off. I told her everything that happened to me. I explained to her that I was going to have trust issues and she understood. A year later, she told me that I was going to be a dad and insisted that I have a DNA test just so I could have peace of mind. I had forgotten what it felt like to be happy again, and when my son was born, I was overjoyed. I called my grandmother for the first time in years. She cried, and when I told her about my son, she insisted that I come to New York so she could meet her great-grandchild, guilt-tripping me by saying that she was 90 and would like to see me one more time. I agreed. We flew to New York, rented a car, and drove to Bushwick. The one thing I dislike about the hood is that you only need to see one person from your past, and the whole neighborhood knows that you're back. My grandmother saw my son, met my fiance, and made an offhand comment in Spanish about her being white, and I just yesed her to death. I was planning to spend the week doing the tourist thing for once. It was Jocelyn's first time in her life in the Big Apple, and I wanted to make it special. Damn it, nothing worked out as planned. First, my ex shouted my name from downstairs. I looked out the window and was surprised at how fat she had gotten. My grandmother told me in Spanish to talk to her, and Jocelyn agreed. I went downstairs and was awkwardly silent for a minute, and that anger just came back like a flood. Marisol told me that I looked good and said that she looked like shit. She told me that she missed me and that she had never been with another man since the divorce, and I ignored her. She even had the audacity to tell me that I'm a grandfather, and I gave her a look. Apparently, Luna got with a decent guy and got knocked up at 18. Her baby daddy joined the Marines to support them, and her father wanted nothing to do with her. He just paid the child support and refused to acknowledge her. He's no longer a pastor and is working at the Banco Popular 2 blocks over. Then she told me that Luna named the baby after me, and I couldn't stand looking at her. Marisol wanted me to wait because Luna was on her way over, but I just walked away. I went to my grandmother's house and I didn't have to tell Jocelyn anything. She just knew, and we left. In the elevator, I told her what happened, and she smiled and told me everything was going to be alright. The look on Marisol's face when we left the building was something else. She was looking at my fiance like she was the other woman, and Jocelyn, without missing a beat, introduced my son to her. She said, "I would like you to meet his biological child." That was a knife twist, but she knew my pain. Marisol kept trying to stop me from leaving, telling me that Luna felt bad about what she did and that Jocelyn wanted me to make amends, but I was so angry. I hopped into the car, ignoring Marisol's pleas, and Jocelyn told me to extend an olive branch. So I gave her my number so Luna could call me and left. At the red light, I saw my cousin by the Cuchifrito stand, and I didn't know what came over me. I got out of the car, ran up to him, and beat the shit out of him. Jocelyn was screaming, telling me to stop, and when we locked eyes, I could see the fear. I spat on him and left. I'm back home, working, being a dad, and a good fiance to a beautiful woman. Yet, since going back when I'm alone with my thoughts, the anger comes back. Luna did text me with a picture of her smiling with her son, telling me that she was sorry for what she did. Yet, I don't know if she's sorry that she missed me or if she's sorry because the man she wanted to be her father wasn't the man she thought he was. I'm so confused and I'm scared to reach out to her. I want to get past this. I want to move on. My family was my everything. My daughter was my world. Even after all these years, it still hurts and it still makes me angry, but I know I need to move on and it's hard. I want to reach out to Luna, but I'm so scared. I have people telling me to let her back in, but all I can think about are those text messages messages and the lies. The constant lies. I need help and my usual methods are not working. Thank you for reading this. I needed to vent. As I mentioned, I don't care if you think this is fake. I really don't give a rat's ass, but your help is appreciated. Update. I'm waiting for the mods to approve this. It's been a while and yesterday was Father's Day. Luna tried calling me several times and I looked at the phone. I wanted to answer, but I didn't. All that kept lingering in my mind were those messages, what she said to her mother, to her real father, and to her friends. So I ignored it. Eventually, I listened to her voicemail and she sounded so cheerful. She briefly apologized for her actions, but to me, it didn't sound sincere, just passive. Maybe I'm overthinking it. She mentioned her son, her fiance, and asked me to call her. Simple request, but I became infuriated. My grandmother and my fiance are telling me to give her a chance, but when I asked my grandmother if Luna or Marisol ever asked about me in the 4 years I was gone, she said Marisol did, constantly, but not Luna. So in my twisted mind, I think Luna wants me in her life so her child would be taken care of. Or maybe she wanted to milk me, and that made me so angry. Even Marisol tried calling me constantly, and I'm already thinking about changing my number. So I spent the majority of my Father's Day in the gym, hitting the heavy bag, and I have an appointment today with an anger management group. Maybe they can give me an outside opinion. If this ever gets published by the mods, I would like to get your opinion as well. In the meantime, I'm just figuring this out on my own. Update 2. I would like to thank Luigi on Fiji 42 for his advice on sending an email as a start. I sent a small email to Luna that simply said, "What do you want?" I didn't expect the multi-paragraph response. She started the email by profusely apologizing for how she acted. She said that when she found out I wasn't her father, she was angry. She confronted her mother and her mother cried, making her promise not to tell me. Since she felt lost, she began to talk to my cousin, her real father, more and more. He told her about my violent past, the things I used to do, things that I kept a secret from her. This made her angry, and the more they spent time together, the more she pulled away from me. She said she felt bad from time to time, but my cousin reinforced her feelings toward me. On the day of the quinceañera, she said that while we were dancing, she realized how stupid she was acting. She realized how much I loved her, and then her messages appeared on screen. In the days that followed, she was told by my wife's side of the family to give me space, not to call me. And she listened. She said she was watching her family fall apart because of her and she couldn't do anything to fix it. She told me she understood why I did what I did, yet she wanted to reach out. Her grandfather kept telling her that I loved her, that I raised her, and despite what I saw through her messages, I would do the right thing, and she believed him. During the divorce, her mother fell into a dark place, not talking to her, barely eating, she was just existing. When she found out that my name was removed from her birth certificate, she said she had a panic attack. Her mother told her that they would have to move back to Brooklyn, and when she asked about her life and school, her mother told her that was the life your father gave you and he's not your father anymore. So she called me, begging, and I cursed her out, then hung up. She cried for days. She tried to reach out to my cousin, who pretty much ignored her. She even went to the church and he told her to leave and called her a mistake. Her mother refused to talk to her and basically locked herself in a room, only leaving to use the bathroom or take a shower. She begged her grandfather to take her to see me, and when they came to Long Island, she learned that I had moved. Her grandfather told her that he would talk to my grandmother and find out where I went. For the next 2 years, according to her, it was hell. The entire neighborhood knew what happened to her and her mother. Her father avoided her at all costs and tried not to pay child support. It took her grandfather threatening him to start paying. In the meantime, her mother didn't talk to her. She was just locked in her room. The few times they did speak, she called her an ungrateful girl and said she was the reason why she lost the love of her life. Her grandfather had to put her mother in her place by telling her that her infidelity was the reason why she lost the love of her life, and she locked herself back in the room. So Luna barely stayed home. And that was how she met the father of her child. He worked in the corner bodega. They were the same age, and after a few months of talking, one thing led to another, and she ended up pregnant. Her grandfather was furious, but when her boyfriend insisted that he would marry her, that cooled things down. Luna said her pregnancy was a blessing in disguise. Her mother began talking to her again and even began leaving the room to be by her side for every checkup. Being a senior in high school while pregnant was cliche, but she made it work. A month before the baby was born, she graduated and her boyfriend joined the Marines. He wanted to elope before leaving, but she wanted a wedding. Her boyfriend had no issues naming his son after me. Apparently, his father was absent, and the fact that he was a junior was a reminder that he shared the name of a man who didn't want him. When she heard I was in town, she got a speeding ticket trying to get to my grandmother's apartment. She wanted to see me, wanted to apologize, wanted me to see her son. She just wanted to see me. However, she was late and she cried. When her mother gave her my number, she wanted to call me immediately, but the entire neighborhood was talking about how I beat her father up, so she waited. Her mother was sad to see that I had moved on and had a son. Luna was happy to know she had a little brother, but her mother became a little more depressed. I felt sorry for Marisol. After I read the email, I called Marisol and asked her if this was true, that she refused to talk to Luna for years and blamed her for our divorce. She confirmed it, and at first I yelled at her, but I regained my composure when I heard her crying. I told her to move on and find someone else, but she said no. She told me that I was her husband and that I would always be her husband. It broke my heart a little. I then had my grandmother go see my cousin so I could talk to him. The second he heard my voice, he began to cry and begged me to forgive him. I just asked him why he didn't want to be a father to Luna. Why did he poison her against me? He said it was envy. He was in love with Marisol and I took her from him. When I was arrested, he consoled her. He manipulated her, and she barely lasted a second with him before she realized what she was doing and shoved him off of her, but he had already come. When she found out she was pregnant, he knew the baby was his. They both knew. It was supposed to be a secret. Marisol took her double hysterectomy as God's punishment for her infidelity and deceit. When Luna turned 13, he was drunk. Seeing my life, envy was the one sin he couldn't shake. So he wanted to ruin it, and he did. I told him that when we see each other again in hell, I would be his eternal torturer, and then I hung up on him. Jocelyn was there for me. She told me that everything would be okay. Luna and I communicated through email. I spoke to her on the 4th. She spent over an hour crying while talking to me. I even spoke to her boyfriend, who asked me for permission to marry her. I thought it was funny but honorable. My wedding is next month and Jocelyn wants me to invite Luna. At the same time, Luna wants me to give her away at her wedding in November. My future father-in-law sat me down and told me that he couldn't grasp my situation, but respected the road I took, because that road saved his little girl and gave him a handsome grandson and a future son-in-law that he would kill for. That made me laugh. But he told me that I need to let go of the anger and start forgiving, but never forget. He's right. So we gave Luna an invitation to my wedding and even offered to pay for the plane ticket. Her boyfriend, or should I say fiance, said that he would work it off at my garage when they arrive. I kind of like him. As for me giving her away, I don't know yet. Let's see how the wedding goes first. Thank you again for the advice and the few DMs. No one was rude or disrespectful. You guys help me so much. I'll update if something happens, but for now, I have to get things ready for my wedding next month. Might be my final update. A lot has happened in such a short window. Again, I would like to thank the large number of supporters within the direct messages. Of course, there were hate messages, but all I can say to those people is that what you would have done and what I did are two different mindsets. And until you go through the same situation or something similar, don't tell me how I should have felt. Leading up to the wedding, I was already on eggshells. Jocelyn was the happiest I have ever seen her, and my in-laws were freaking out due to the number of people that were coming. I swear, I think the whole town came. While all this was happening, I was an hour and a half away in Boise, waiting for Luna and her family at the airport. In the days leading up to her visit, we spoke a lot. She mostly cried and apologized, and I just listened. When she couldn't speak anymore, I talked to her fiance, who is more down to earth. When their plane landed, I was so scared, not for seeing her again, but because I was afraid of my anger. I was afraid that I would lose my temper. The second she saw me at the terminal, she ran to me, crying, and for a split second, I saw my daughter when she was 7. It was weird picturing a child in my mind. She ran, screaming daddy, and the second she hugged me, she began to cry loudly. It was like a wail that caused so many people to look at us. She just kept saying sorry over and over, asking me to forgive her, and I just held her for over 15 minutes. She refused to let me go. It took her fiance and me to convince her to do so. It was as if she felt that the second she let go, I would vanish. After she composed herself, her fiance properly introduced himself, and then they introduced me to their child. I won't lie, I cried. I wasn't angry, but I cried while holding this infant. Luna was also the spitting image of her mother when she was 19, which made me wonder about Marisol. During the drive home, we talked about her fiance's boot camp, how he was going to be a career man, and how Luna was going to college online to learn accounting, mostly catching up in conversation. When we arrived at my house, Jocelyn and her family had a spread ready for them. Since we've been together, Jocelyn learned how to cook Spanish foods, but the week leading up to Luna's visit, she went a little overboard. Yet I get it. She wanted to make an impression. She and Luna just hit it off. Every few minutes, Luna would walk towards me just to give me a quick hug and then go back to Jocelyn. I was just holding my son and my grandson. While Jocelyn was introducing Luna to her family, I put the babies to bed and went to the porch for some fresh air. Luna's fiancé was standing at the foot of the yard, staring at all of the bison roaming around. For a moment, I wanted to give him the dad talk, but I felt that it wasn't my place. Instead, I asked him how he liked the view, and he was awestruck. I know the feeling. Living in the city for the majority of your life, wide open spaces are a marvel to take in. After a minute or two, he looked at me and told me how regretful Luna was. I've been with your daughter for 3 years, and not a day goes by when she doesn't mention how much she misses you and regrets what she did. Out of everything he told me, that single sentence constantly replays in my mind. Her fiancé's name is Roberto, and for a man who is only 19 years old, he acts and talks like a man in his 30s. That tells me he has had a rough life to mature so quickly. I know the feeling. The following day, I had to go to the shop, and Luna practically jumped into the car with the baby. Even Roberto told her it was okay and to enjoy herself. Luna looked like she was going to hyperventilate, and I told her that we would work a half day and I would spend the rest of the day with her. That seemed to do it, and I slowly began to realize how traumatized Luna was. During the drive, I asked Roberto how bad she was. He said she has severe abandonment issues and is constantly afraid that he's going to leave her, despite him telling her that he never would. She calls him a lot. She's a bit clingy at times, and in the beginning, she was afraid to be herself for fear that they would break up. He had to reaffirm his love for her just so she could let her guard down a little. This was my doing. I know that, but he doesn't blame me. He told me he completely understood why I did what I did. Allow me to say that Roberto is a terrible mechanic. He knows nothing about cars, so I had him clean up at the shop so he could work off the plane tickets. We closed early, and when we arrived, Luna practically ran toward me. She looked unhinged. I told her that I would be back, and she went to her fiancé. When I walked into my house, Jocelyn told me that Luna needed to be reminded that everything was going to be fine and that I wouldn't leave her again. I didn't know what to say, but Jocelyn grabbed my hands and told me that Luna was hurting and she needed her father. For the next couple of days, I spent all of my time with Luna getting reacquainted with her. I took her to my in-laws' ranch and showed her the bison, the elk, and took her on a hike. 2 days before the wedding, I apologized to her for leaving. I apologized for the way I acted and for the actions I took. She didn't want to hear any of it. She told me that there was nothing I should apologize for. She said she knew she was the reason why it all fell apart, that she knew it was her fault, and I had to stop her. I began to cry. I told her that it wasn't her fault. I was angry, I was hurting, and despite what happened, I should be the one who apologized. We both cried and just held each other. Luna appeared to be slightly better. On the day of my wedding, she was happy. At the last minute, Jocelyn made her a bridesmaid and Roberto a groomsman. The wedding was beautiful. During the reception, I asked the DJ to play the song from Luna's quinceañera, and I asked her to dance with me. She was crying the entire time, holding on to me for dear life as we danced. I haven't felt this happy in a long time. I let Luna and her fiancé stay in my house, taking care of her little brother while I went to Hawaii for my honeymoon. When we got home, she was happy. She hugged us, and it felt great. Roberto told me that he's going to Camp Dwyer in Afghanistan and would like to know if Luna could stay near us. He would pay for an apartment near us until he could buy a house. Of course, I said yes. They went back to the city the day before yesterday. Like I said, it's been eventful. Luna's wedding is in November and Roberto is leaving in December. Roberto sent me what constitutes a year's rent for a townhouse community 3 miles away from my house. However, Jocelyn suggested we should put a double wide on our property for Luna and let her save her money to buy a house when Roberto comes back. Marisol has been blowing up my phone, and based on the messages she left, she's not happy that Luna is moving. Right now, my focus is on my family and mending my relationship with my daughter. This woman is nothing short of a piece of shit, and out of everyone that could have been the girl's father, it's OP's own fucking cousin. That's some crazy shit. OP's character development sounds like something straight out of a movie. The guy became an infinitely better man in order to become a good father, just to find out that it was all a lie. My heart fucking hurts for this guy, and this woman for trying to gaslight OP into supporting her and the daughter. Now, it does seem that OP is going to accept them back into his life. Obviously, this isn't my life, so it doesn't really matter what OP does. But I know I wouldn't be able to accept them back. I would just be too angry every moment I'm near them. But if this decision is what OP believes will make him the most happy, then it is the right choice for him. Now, about 4 months after this post, OP went to the comments and gave us an update under the original story. Update: first, I would like to thank everyone for the positive feedback and support in the comments and DMs. Also, I apologize for the delay in the update. I waited for Luna to come back from her honeymoon so I could show her this post. Our therapist wanted us to be transparent when it comes to this situation. I wanted to make sure I was sharing any information since this is also about her. She read the post, but I refused to let her see any of the hateful comments considering how much she was crying from the post. Yet she had no issues with me posting an update. Then a tragedy happened with the passing of my grandmother and I had to put it on hold. So let's begin with where I left off. Jocelyn and I managed to get a double wide on our property and had everything ready for Luna and Roberto. Many people wondered why Jocelyn kept pushing to make peace in the beginning. Jocelyn didn't want my lingering anger to affect our family and wanted me to make peace with myself for our family's sake. I am grateful for that. As I mentioned before, Marisol was constantly calling me, and the day Luna left New York, I spoke to her. She was crying and angry with me, telling me that I had taken her child and grandchild from her. I tried to explain to her that I wanted to rebuild my relationship with Luna, and almost immediately, she began asking me about rebuilding my relationship with her. I had to tell her that I couldn't, which caused her to cry, and then she hung up on me. Luna and Roberto loved the trailer, and the first thing Roberto did was start the process of repaying me. I told him that it wasn't needed, but he insisted, and I appreciated it. A few days later, Luna and I had our first therapy session, and I learned about all the anxiety medication she was taking and that she suffered from chronic panic attacks. One thing I can share about our sessions is that Luna is very remorseful and has suffered from years of verbal abuse from Marisol. There were things that shocked me, some things that I found to be unbelievable, but they were confirmed when I spoke to my former father-in-law. Marisol verbally and emotionally abused her. My cousin mentally destroyed her, and despite my feelings and the actions I took, I know I hurt her too. 2 weeks after they arrived, Roberto received news that he was being deployed sooner, so they had to move their wedding up. At first, Luna wanted to wait for him to come home, but Roberto insisted. He wanted them to be married before he left. Jocelyn and I offered to help pay for the wedding, but Luna told me she only wanted me to walk her down the aisle and give her away. I know people kept telling me to get a DNA test because there wasn't one from the court due to the circumstantial evidence that was provided. Allow me to tell you there's no need for that. Luna is O positive, I'm AB negative, Marisol is B positive, and my cousin is O positive. However, despite what happened, Luna is my daughter. I only wish I hadn't been blinded by rage. Anyway, the wedding had to be small since it was being held on my in-laws' ranch. My former father-in-law, Roberto's mother, Marisol, and my grandmother were invited. My grandmother couldn't come because she wasn't feeling well, and Marisol was admitted to the hospital for trying to hurt herself. Luna didn't take the news well, and I was angry at Marisol because she expected Luna to come back to New York to help take care of her. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, I learned I was going to be a father again, and I was ecstatic. Roberto learned the hard way about breaking a horse, and I began teaching him how to fix cars. Again, I like this kid. The day before the wedding, my former father-in-law arrived with Roberto's mother. His mother is a very kind person, and I commended her for raising a fine young man. My former father-in-law was stoic as always, but we spoke. He told me that he was disappointed that I left, but given the circumstances, he understood. He only wished that his daughter would move on as well. On the day of the wedding, Jocelyn was Luna's maid of honor, and I tried my best not to cry as I walked her down the aisle, but it was difficult. It was even more difficult for her. During the reception, we played the Quince song again for our father-daughter dance, and again, she just held on to me. For those who want to know, the song is Cinderella by Stephen Curtis Chapman. During their honeymoon, things were getting back to normal, and I was planning to write an update, but a few days before they came home, my grandmother passed. This hurt me because she wasn't just my grandmother, she was my mother. As I mentioned, I never knew my parents. Both my mother and father passed away alongside my cousin's parents when I was a few months old in a car accident, and she raised us together. So, while preparing to go to New York for the funeral, I was trying to control myself and prepare to see my cousin. We went as a family to New York. My grandmother was laid to rest in Cypress Hill Cemetery. Yet, during the funeral, with my wife, daughter, and son-in-law beside me, I wasn't angry. I didn't bother acknowledging my cousin during the funeral, and as we left, my cousin kept trying to talk to me, practically begging for me to yell at him, to hit him, and for some reason, my ignoring him just hurt him even more. A few days before we went back to Idaho, Luna and I visited Marisol at Bellevue. She was excited to see us, sad that she missed the wedding, and we thought everything was fine until we had to leave. She began to cry, telling the orderly that she wanted to go home with her husband. She begged me to take her home, saying that I was the love of her life and to please just take her home. I just cried as they took her away. Luna broke down as well, and it took a while before either of us had the strength to leave the visitors' lounge. My former father-in-law told us that Marisol was never the same after the divorce. She still celebrated my birthday and our anniversary, and he would argue with her to move forward, but she never did. He said she isolated herself and was verbally abusive toward Luna for a long time. Luna's pregnancy just took her out of the trance. He said that the 13 months of being nice to our daughter doesn't take away from the 4 years of negligence and abuse she inflicted on her. He hopes the hospital will help her. Jocelyn told me that I would have to forgive her so she could forgive herself. Right now, as I'm typing, things are okay. Jocelyn and I are as thick as thieves. Roberto left for Saudi Arabia last week, and Luna is trying to appear strong with him gone, but she's doing it poorly. She has been clinging to me and Jocelyn. I thought Jocelyn might be bothered, but she has been loving spending time with her. She is indeed a wonderful woman. She has been taking Luna all across town, introducing her as her daughter. I thought it might bother Luna, but she was very happy about it. I forgave Marisol, and I hope she can find the strength to move on. User Emperor Helix commented the following: "This is worthy of a movie. Honestly, sir, if you can pitch this to a miniseries for a Spanish novella, I think it would be a hit. Thank you for sharing this. This is, without a doubt, the best story I've ever heard. I can somewhat relate because I too had a rough childhood, nowhere near as rough as yours though. I am from NYC and grew up in Sunset Park, where drama like this is unfortunately common. My father was constantly in jail for selling drugs and burglary, so I never knew him well. I remember only 6 months with him when I was 8. Then he got arrested in front of me and went right back in jail for selling drugs, with me in tow for most of them. Then he died of hepatitis C when I was 10. I never learned how to be a man and was a little asshole for years. However, when I turned to 23, I joined the Navy. I left 3 years ago, and now I live on my own, have my dream car, 2002 Toyota Celica GTS, and work a great job. However, I still think about how my father could have been better because he was a master DJ back when they actually used turntables, getting paid $500 a night to play at clubs. I harbor resentment for his poor decisions and what it did to my mother and sister. Earlier this year, I visited his grave after 20 years and just said, "I win, Dad. I'm here and you're not. I'm here for my family, but you aren't. I hope you're proud I didn't make the mistakes you did." Another user named Camacho94 said, "Well, you're obviously still growing as we all are. Luna will always be your baby girl. You did so much for her, and you were even there when she was born. You held her and heard her take her first breath. It truly sucks that you went through all of that, and I'm so glad that everything turned out great in the end." When there's darkness, light is bound to show, and in this, the light was Luna realizing everything and maturing into the beautiful woman she is now. She now has her father's back. Telling her it wasn't her fault was the smart thing to do because it wasn't really. It's never the child's fault. As much as your ex-dad hated you from those times, whether you saw it or not, or maybe you still don't, he always respected you. From your texts and what you've been saying, the grandfather is old school, and he knows when there's a real man in his child's life, and he knows you were that man for his daughter. When all of that happened, he was furious. I know already thought he was furious the moment you said that Marisol was blaming her own daughter for the divorce between her and you, and her dad told her, "No, it's not her fault, it is your fault, and your fault only nobody else's." Be involved in Luna's life. Repress those negative memories and only remember the good times you've had with her from the day she was born. Luna loves you a whole lot, as your wife has mentioned. She is hurting and probably still is, even after you guys consoled each other before the wedding. It sounds to me like Luna has grown really well, regrets all that has happened, seeks forgiveness, attends to what she thinks she has done, accepts the consequences that came, and is hell-bent on not doing that ever again. Mend everything with Luna, and hopefully all all of this will stay in the past. As the grandfather said, learn to forgive but never forget. Always remember that. User Thundering Tacos said, saw this story on YouTube. Honestly, it's really bittersweet and just messy. I'm happy that you seem to be healing and letting your anger loosen its grip on you, and that in spite of many screwed up situations life put you in, you never gave up on finding a better life for yourself, even if it was hard. I'm also very happy you did reach out to your daughter, gained more understanding of the situation, began to make amends, and started a long process of healing. I cannot imagine the kind of suffering she had to have gone through, being made a pawn for a jealous cousin's scheme, being poisoned against her father who has done nothing short of giving her the best life she could ask for in such an already confusing time in her adolescent life, being made to lie and hide her own mother's infidelity for years, feeling like she can talk to no one about it as a vulnerable young girl, then getting fed what she thinks is a reprieve from all her confusion in an empty promise for a better life, still feeling confused and upset for things she had nothing to do with and no control over. And just when she starts to find clarity, maybe have a chance to see through it, her whole world is destroyed. Any and everyone she knew knows what happened. Doors to her future all closing at once. The man who led her down this path abandoning her. For years being led to believe her being born was a mistake that destroyed her family, and having to leave her friends and home with no support system. Not being able to explain what happened, how it happened, why it happened, and feeling like it was all your fault. I can see why she'd have deep abandonment issues and a ridiculous amount of guilt. She needs to know she's loved, that it wasn't her fault all that took place, that she doesn't have to carry those feelings alone, and that slowly but surely she can feel secure in the knowledge that something like that won't happen again. As for the ex, it's more of a mixed bag. I do feel like she didn't intend to cause the harm she did and will carry that weight of regret for the rest of her life as she watches what was once her family moved on to the life she once had and never can again. That she felt she was once a good person, trying to see the good in others like you, even when no one else would. She made a mistake, one that probably felt small when she was younger and dumber, and immediately regretted it. But she did betray the trust you two built, lied to you for years, convinced your own daughter to lie to you, and put her between an emotional rock and a hard place where a child was forced to carry internalized guilt and confusion while being manipulated by an evil man. Seriously, cannot feel sorry in any respect or regard for that cousin. He nearly destroyed 3 lives as well as his own cause. He was jealous of a woman he should have moved on from long ago. Honestly, I don't what the best move is there. Unlike the cousin, I don't think she was trying to be a bad person, that she just made a big mistake and was trying to hide it. And if left to her own devices, I don't think she will heal. She needs help. Having said that, after what she put you and your daughter through, it's perfectly understandable if that isn't something you care about. She may have been a person who at one point inspired you against all odds to better yourself from a self-destructive path, but that was then, and it doesn't change what she ultimately did. Best regards to you and your family, and regardless of what happens, I hope it's all for the best for everyone. Again, except for the cousin. Obviously, I can't go over every single comment under this post, but there were quite a few comments that seemed pretty supportive of Marisol. Perhaps supportive isn't the best word, but some of these comments didn't seem to be as harsh on her as I would have expected. So I'm not sure if I'm in the minority with my thinking or what. But anyway, OP is truly a strong person. I'm still on the younger side of life, so I'm sure 5 to 10 years down the line, my attitude and thinking will change. But right now, with the way I process and handle emotions, I couldn't do anything like OP, even though forgiveness is probably the best thing for your health. Now, this story in general is quite long, so I will be cutting it off here. There are about 3 to 4 additional updates from OP that I will be covering in a later video, so make sure to subscribe if you want to listen to those. Once part 2 is up, I will link it in the comments and the description.